Hi, everybody. Thank you so much and welcome to the Kalaghoda Festival. Today is day 5. I can't believe it. This is the first time the festival goes virtual and we're already on day 5. That means we've got 4 more days to go. And in case you haven't checked out the rest of the roster, I would urge you to do that. Please log on to KGAF 2021. There's also an amazing virtual marketplace that you guys must check out. And please support artisans that have come from the length and breadth of the country to be part of this year's Kalaghoda virtual experience. Let me give you a quick idea of what's coming up in the next couple of days. I'm really looking forward to my Saturday evening because a very, very cool group called Amhi Kon is going to be showing us how they write and they rap in Marathi. And it's something that I'm really looking forward to. Then there's Sunday, which is Valentine's Day. There's some great sessions lined up, but the ones that I'm really excited about are, a tete-a-tete between Veer Das and Rohan Joshi, and that happens the evening. There's also a beautiful session, which is a college reunion between Pankaj Das Sahab and Kavita Krishnamurti. So you can find all of these details when you log on to KGAF 2021, and please do check out our YouTube channel as well. Coming to today's session, while we were designing the Kalaghoda Arts Festival roster, as they call it, or the programming for this year, I think we would have been rather tone deaf if we hadn't included mental health as part of our lineup. Yes, it's an arts festival. Yes, it's a festival of culture. But more importantly, the Kalaghoda Festival has always been a festival of its people. And that is you. And if there's something that 2020 has taught us, it's the fact that no matter what you do, no matter which field you're part of, mental health is something that is a consideration for all of us to pay attention to. And maybe that's why today Sonali Gupta is here with us. Let me give you a quick intro. A lot of you might have already known of her, but if you don't and you just joined in because of the title of this workshop, Mumbai-based Sonali Gupta is one of India's leading clinical psychologists with 16 years of experience. Her new book, Anxiety, Overcome It and Live Without Fear, was released in May 2020. And this was something that she's been working on for a very, very long time. She's also been a columnist for a leading newspaper with a very, very popular column. And now that column has a new home, which is at the Mint Lounge. It's a fortnightly, and I'm sure that she's going to garner lots of fans because of it. So please do pick up a copy and please do read her column. She advises several leading businesses and organizations in addition to her own practice. And with over 60,000 subscribers, her YouTube channel, Mental Health with Sonali, is a one-off, if not the largest for a mental health professional in India. She's passionate about causing a breakthrough and ending the stigma around mental health in India. Ladies and gentlemen, with no further ado, I give you Sonali Gupta at the Kalaghoda Arts Festival.
Thank you, Rohini and Kalaghoda Festival for making mental health a part of this. And I'm very excited to be doing this. In today's session, we are going to talk about what anxiety looks like. And then we are going to talk about what triggers our anxiety for each one of us. And lastly, how do we manage anxiety? So covering all those 3 areas part by part. Now, without further ado, let's move to the presentation and then we can take it from there. So I would be speaking for about 40 minutes. And, if you have any queries during this time, you can save it for the last 20 minutes and I can try and address it during that time. So let's get started, on this. Unlocking anxiety. If all throughout the pandemic, if there's one word which has been used again and again by most people, it's that I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling nervous, I don't know what's happening. Anxiety, even before the pandemic, and now more so with the pandemic, has become something that each one of us have experienced, and so have I. I've had sessions virtually last now 10 months, almost 11 months, almost since March 13th. And I've struggled with the anxiety and also the sorrow of not handing out tissues to my clients, not being able to see them. And I think each one of us has experienced that anxiety in some way or the other. Now we are going to move to the next slide. The next slide talks about some of these statements that most people have felt or experienced. You can hear all the sounds in the background as I speak. So the first thing that a lot of people have said in the last few months is I feel constantly exhausted and tired. Second, I struggle with falling off to sleep and often end up delaying sleep. Third, I easily get irritated or frustrated on most days as compared to before. I find it very hard to be hopeful about the future. These are some of the statements that have been repeatedly used by people in the last 11 months across gender, across sex, and across age groups, whether it's somebody who's 15 years old to somebody who's 70. Also, activities that interested me don't excite me as much. I feel disillusioned and question challenge the purpose of what I'm doing. I feel increased cynicism or bitterness towards life. What has happened, while we have been at home, I think we are also working, from home, not just working at home. Our entire world has changed. And, I was speaking to a friend yesterday, and he was telling me that, when we talk of anxiety, the pandemic has triggered all our fears, which possibly were already there, but now they have moved, they are exaggerated, given that the safety of our loved one has been at risk. Now we are going to move to the next slide, which talks about what anxiety looks like. One thing that people have asked me over and over again is, what is anxiety? How do I know that I'm feeling anxious? So just to explain that, anxiety can be understood as a feeling of restlessness or uneasiness which primarily has to do with tasks or actions lined up for the future. No tech error, I'm back. Can you all see and hear me? Okay, great. So, I'm going to give an example of this client during the pandemic. This 30-year-old tells me, while I am safe, my family members are safe, all of us are safe. My constant fear is what would if there's something that happens to their health. His family members lived in a different city. What would I do? Every night I sleep with the fear that what's going to happen next. Every time a delivery comes, a package comes, he wonders about, did he wash his hands enough? Did he think about, did he go and sanitize the parcel well? There's a constant fear, and every time the parcel came, or even now, the same client tells me the first time he went out to meet a friend, he spent the next 2 nights and even days worrying about what if he contracts the virus. The reality is, even in the absence of the virus, when we feel anxious, we constantly think about what if something goes wrong? What if things don't work out for me? Now, in the next slide, we are also talking about how anxiety comes with this constant sense of self doubt, right? When people have anxiety, people are constantly thinking about, did I do something wrong? Did I miss out on something? It's a constant feeling that people have where they are second guessing their capacity to deal with various situations. So let this be at work. So it could show up in simplest of things. If people have a flight to catch in a pre-pandemic world, people would think, oh, what if I get the traffic and I don't manage to reach? Now, when we are doing sessions via technology, for me, anxiety shows up thinking, what if my internet stops working? What if I get disconnected? There are other ways where anxiety show up in the feeling that, oh, did on a call, did I say something extra? Maybe did I make, did I say something which was out of line? What if, I forgot to wash my hands? It's a constant sense of doubt that people have. So, for example, when people are posting images on social media, right? And during the pandemic, the amount of posting we did on social media or how much we consumed massively increased. People would post an image and spend so much time second guessing themselves. Also, in the context of, when you're speaking to your boss, when you have a presentation, let's say you send a message, you send a presentation to someone and you don't hear from them. If you struggle with anxiety, your anxiety will show up in moments where you wonder, what happened, why are they not responding, are they angry at me, has something happened? Anxiety continually shows up in our capacity to second guess, to not trust ourselves. In the next slide, we are speaking about a quote, which is one of my favorite ones, which has formed, huge part of what I've written in the book and what I've shared with all of you from the book. That our anxiety does not come from, thinking about the future, but it comes from wanting to control it. And I think the pandemic at our sense of control. And that's what it is, where we are feeling anxious because we want to control so many things. And at the same time, we realize that we can't control. Like one of the ways anxiety shows up is where people worry about the health of their loved ones even before the pandemic, even when they are doing fine. In the presentation today, we are going to speak about how and what can you do that allows you to manage your anxiety. So while we can't control the future, we think about the future. How can we learn to trust ourselves? We are going to move to the next slide talking about how anxiety shows up for all of us, right? Um, one of the ways um, anxiety shows up is physically. At the same time, anxiety is very invisible. So, one of the reasons I decided to write this book and for us to do this topic is also because very often people would tell me, nobody who knows me knows I'm feeling anxious. I work 10 hours, in a day. I managed to call my family, speak to my friends. I have been around everyone. I am not failing at work. I'm doing exceptionally well at work. But inside, I feel there's a pit in the stomach, one of the signs of anxiety. I constantly feel rapid heart rate. I also have sweaty palms. I feel tremors, when people would have tremors, either hands, legs. Also, a shortness of breath, what we call labored breathing. Now, all these signs are insidious, others can't see it, but you are experiencing it on a daily basis. So, one of the way anxiety shows up is physical. Secondly, anxiety shows up in emotional symptoms. Our emotional symptoms could be this constant sense of hypervigilance, right? For all of us, when the delivery guy comes, your heart start beating a little faster, maybe a little less now, but early in the pandemic, that would happen. Also, clients would say every time a phone rang, and if their partner or parents were far away, they would think, what if something has happened to them, right? Second, it shows up in the form of irritability and sometimes even anger, right? So your surface emotion could be irritability, anger, but if you go below, it would be anxiety. The second one, people often feel overwhelmed and they feel there's so much that they're juggling with. It's as if there's a podcast going in your mind, your thoughts are constantly running. It's like having 10 voices in your head that are constantly telling you that you can't trust yourself. And trust me, that's not a good feeling to have. And, I don't need to tell it to you. Maybe if you have sensed it, experienced it at some stage. The last is this, emotional symptom is a feeling of being lost. When people feel anxious, they continually get this feeling that they are doing things wrong. They don't know what they are really doing. The other is the most important one, behaviorally. How does it show in our behavior? So before the pandemic, if somebody was anxious, what I talk about in my book, people would often, let's say you get a party invite, somebody wants you to attend their party, you say yes to. But the day you have to go to the party, you are feeling anxious, you are worried that people see through my anxiety. What if people can sense I'm really nervous? Then you end up canceling them. So while, a lot of millennials and Gen Z have been shamed for being flaky, I feel, we are labeling them and contributing to their anxiety, which is extremely unhealthy. Sometimes people not being able to show up, people being, people avoiding tasks is also a part of anxiety. Second is tend to avoid situations, because they may be triggered. What happens with anxiety is low self-esteem. So people feel I am not good enough, I don't have anything interesting to say. People will find me boring. What if, I start sweating in front of everyone? What if I start panicking? Also, anxiety shows up in behaviors which are, not the most adaptive, right? So it would mean maybe, smoking too much. Like a client of mine would say, and I mentioned this again in the book, she would say, the only time of the day I actually feel at calm is during my cigarette breaks. When I go down, you know, out of my office for a cigarette break is the only time when I feel centered. So, people would engage in behaviors, which would, in a way, make them feel like it was calming their anxiety. Consuming large amounts of coffee, it would also mean, binge watching for hours. One of the things that so many people have said is they keep their television on, and this used to happen even before the pandemic. So whether it's watching Friends, whether it's Big Bang Theory, they would have the noise, the serial going in the background that would help them fall off to sleep. So that's one of the way people would use. That's how the anxiety would manage. They would need to quieten their thoughts with something going on the television. Then it shows up in the context of overthinking, where, let's say, for example, you are supposed to, meet someone and they haven't texted you back, whether they are meeting you or not. You're thinking, oh, I'm wondering if they're going to cancel the plan. Did I force them into meeting them? Are they going to cancel last minute? Do they feel forced into meeting me? It's just a thought spiral over and over. And people think about the worst case scenario. So for example, if their boss sends them a text message, which during the pandemic of course happened a lot, and even before, saying, listen, we need to speak on Monday, their first thought would be, oh, my boss wants to fire me, maybe I've done something wrong, in spite of the fact that on Friday they would have had such a lovely conversation with their boss. Thinking about the worst case scenario is what we call catastrophizing. Ruminative thinking, worry that things would go wrong. Ruminative thinking is going round in circles. Very often anxiety shows up in ways where it's obsessive. So अगर आपके दिमाग में कोई थॉट आ गई है, अटक गई है, तो वो वहां पे ही अटक जाती है. So it can feel so obsessive, where it feels like the thought is not leaving your mind. Also, one of the other features of anxiety is anxiety keeps shifting itself. So today you may be worried about you not doing well at work. If you have a meeting with your boss and he says, how well you're doing, you will now start worrying about, oh, now my boss thinks I'm doing really well. Now I need to maintain this. How do I maintain this? What if I end up failing him? What if I'm an imposter? So anxiety keeps shifting itself. And I think the last one, the most important one, our anxiety gets stuck in our physical body. So our back, when it comes to our stomach, when it comes to our skin, and when it comes to headaches. So these are 4 ways where our anxiety gets stuck. So stress, or what we call tension headaches, with stomach, constipation, acidity, and even irritable bowel syndrome are some of the ways that anxiety gets stuck. Then with skin, hives, urticaria are some other ways. With back, a shoulder pain, backache, and also stiffness in the shoulder are some ways we experience anxiety. Now that you have understood what anxiety looks like, we are going to move into the next slide, which focuses on what are some of the myths about anxiety. Okay. Now, all the statements, just because we have little time and there's a lot to pack in, I'm going to quickly dive into it. All the statements that are mentioned here, one by one, are statements, which are false statements, So the first one, I've never met anyone, to tell you the truth, who has not felt anxious. So if you feel anxious, then it's normal. All of us experience it. Whether we tell others or not is a different story altogether. Second, there are no positive or negative emotions. Emotions are only pleasant or unpleasant, and they evoke pleasant or unpleasant feelings in us. They are not pleasant or unpleasant. Also, anxiety, also has advantages, right? Before we got into the session, the Kala Ghoda team, Rohini, we did a bit of a tech check to see that the internet was working fine. We did a tech check to figure that things went smooth. And that was a way of also preventing things massively falling apart, right? If you are somebody who have acted, Kala Ghoda is an arts festival. If you're somebody who has been on stage, or somebody worked backstage, all know. And if not, even if when you're giving exams 10, 12, we do go to the examination center and do the check, right? Before we go on the stage, we feel that anxiety, and that little bit of adrenaline rush is also good for us, right? It keeps you prepared, allows you to be confident. So anxiety is not an emotion that needs to be done away with. Third, even positive emotions can trigger anxiety. So, let's get into this. You know, a marriage, pregnancy, all of it could also trigger anxiety. Next one, if you're making a life transition, moving cities, that's a big trigger for anxiety. Paying taxes, filing your taxes is a big trigger for anxiety. And if you find yourself struggling, it's okay to reach out to a mental health professional. Let's move to the next slide. Yeah. The next slide talks about, what do panic attacks look like? And I think let's move to the next slide, which is the definition for panic attacks. A lot of people during the pandemic and even before experience panic attacks where they feel that the ground is just slipping away. They feel palpitations. They feel like they're getting a heart attack. In fact, it's very common for people to show up to the hospital in an ER emergency because they are getting a heart attack. Attack often looks like a heart attack. It's a feeling where you may feel pain in the chest, you may feel a palpitation, you may feel that you have difficulty breathing, there's dizziness, even if there's nothing happening that's really creating or evoking anxiety in you. Let's move to the next slide, which is talking about when do we experience panic attack. Let's move to the next slide. I think this, yeah, just we are going to do quickly. In my work over 16 years, I have seen most people have their panic attacks between 10 p.m. to about 3 a.m. That's the time the most panic attacks happen in general across age groups. Also, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. is another time where the vulnerability for it increases. Now, let's do a quick, of what you can do when you have a panic attack and what can you not do. One, meditation. What can you not do? Meditation doesn't work when you're in midst of a panic attack. It would not work. Meditation is something that would work If you're not having a panic attack, in the midst of a panic attack, paying too much attention to yourself, it can backfire. What can work when you're having a panic attack? It helps for people to sit down. One. Second, it helps to tell yourself that I'm having a panic attack. I'm not going to die. This is going to settle soon enough. Most panic attacks last anywhere between 2 minutes to maybe a maximum of 30 minutes, but they leave you massively exhausted and drained. What helps some people is having cold water, going for a cold shower, splashing water on their face. What helps people is what we call belly breathing, where people are engaging in belly breathing, which I mentioned in the book. There's also a video on the YouTube channel that you can watch it today, and maybe in the Q&A we can talk more about it. So belly breathing is what helps. When you're in midst of a panic attack, that suddenly that engaging in that, deep breathing at that time doesn't work. You need belly breathing, which is slow, and it helps to sit down. If you have someone at home, it helps to hold their hand. Also, it helps for some people to call someone and tell them that they're having panic attack. If you think you have a lot of panic attacks, develop a code. If you live alone, then develop a code word with someone so that they can call you immediately when you send them that word, so that they can come to you, they can at least sit with you. Listening to maybe calming music helps with them. But the most important thing is to tell yourself that the attack will go away. And now let's move to whether it's panic attacks or anxiety in the next slide. Let's talk about what triggers it, right? Catastrophizing, our irrational beliefs, and weekend blues. These are some of the triggers to our anxiety. Catastrophizing means thinking of worst case scenario, right? So irrational beliefs, the beliefs that we hold about the world. Also, weekend is the time, Saturday, Sunday, people feel the most lonely. People are also likely to experience a large amount of anxiety and also panic attacks there. When we talk of catastrophizing, people experience panic attacks or anxiety when they start thinking of everything that's going wrong. Imagine that you're staying at home, it's the middle of the night, you are trying to sleep, you suddenly start thinking, my parent lives further away. What if they contract the virus? You start thinking, I'm planning to go abroad to study. What if the pandemic doesn't settle? You start thinking that what if my relationship doesn't last? You're thinking of the worst case scenario without there being any evidence of those things going wrong. That's what catastrophizing is. The important message here is our brain cannot separate a real event from an imagined event. I'm going to say it again. Our brain cannot separate a real event from an imagined event. So the minute your brain is moving to a state where you're thinking this will go wrong, you enter into a thought spiral and into a fight, flight, freeze. Your panic attack is your body, or your anxiety is a feeling where your body is telling you that you need to do something. We'll move to the next slide, talking about what are some of the irrational beliefs that all of us have that also trigger anxiety for all of us at various points. So, all these statements that are mentioned here, I want you to take your time to read it. I must have love and support and approval of all significant people in my life. I have had this at some stage. I cannot get over from something from the past. I should be highly competent at a important task. If I don't get what I want, it's terrible. I can't stand it. Because I strongly desire that people treat me considerately and fairly, they absolutely must do. All these statements are irrational. These statements, we all have felt, maybe you would have identified with 2 of them, 3 of them, or 5 of them also. Now, don't shame yourself for doing that if you have. one of the triggers to our anxiety is our capacity to not be self compassionate, right? We all have felt this at some stage. But these are beyond our control. It's impossible for everyone to love us. It's impossible for us to be perfect in everything that we do. But when we put these expectations on ourselves, we begin to trust ourselves less and as a result feel more anxious. Now we'll be moving to the next slide, where we are going to talk about something which became big during the pandemic. And, it was big even before. I mentioned it in my book. Technology. All of you, would have experienced Zoom fatigue, haven't you? And you must tell me more about it in the Q&A, and we can discuss it more. But there has been a tech fatigue, a technology fatigue that we have had, where we are constantly multitasking. There are various things we are doing at the same time. Also, when we are looking at other people's social media, we are thinking, oh, this one during the pandemic is doing so much, I haven't done enough. What has increased during the pandemic is the performance culture, where we all want to prove how much we are doing. Also, I think even before the pandemic, there was huge productivity guilt, right? Productivity guilt is this consistent feeling where we feel we are not reading enough, we are not watching enough, and as a result of which, we end up cutting down on our sleep. What I call the itch is, even as you are listening to my session and seeing it, maybe you have looked at your phone, right? I'm not trying to shame anyone, because all of us are guilty, of doing it. We have possibly looked at our phone, touched the phone. It's this itch that we have where we want to reach out for the phone and look at in the feel with the feeling that possibly we'll miss out something that's happening. Technology fatigue is one of our triggers to anxiety. What we can do to deal with it? One, it really has helped me to have closure rituals, what I call, which means I figure out a time limit at the end of the day, after which I don't check my phone. Also, as a closure ritual, like during the pandemic, I dress up for work, throughout, day. When I finish the last call, I move to moving to home clothes as a closure ritual to end my day, so that I'm not tired. What tech fatigue does is it leaves us feeling very wired. The next one is set boundaries, to your own day. Figure out when it comes to social media, when it comes to WhatsApp, email, how often do you want to check it? It works to have that 3 times in the day you will answer your emails. Maybe have fixed times. Don't open your eyes and begin checking the phone. We all are guilty of doing it, at some stage or the other. But you're beginning your day by being very, very overwhelmed, and that can be very exhausting. For everyone who multitask, while you're looking at the phone, you're also paying attention to the messages, emails. Let me tell you, in a study that was mentioned before the pandemic, can you imagine what the cost of productivity would be when we are moving between two tasks? Let's say when I'm talking to you, if I look at my phone, my productivity, the time it takes me to get back to my original level of concentration is 23 minutes, 15 seconds. I'm going to repeat, 23 minutes and 15 seconds. That's a massive cost we all are paying for multitasking. Multitasking is the new fashion statement, overrated, at the same time, not healthy for you or for me in the long run. The last one here, I think one of the goals of adult life is we learning what it means to filter feedback. When our colleagues, when our peers, when our friends, family members, when on social media we get feedback, what do we do with it? And we are going to talk more about it in the Q&A, where we can explore it more. Let's move to the next slide, which also talks about, we don't have a choice whether to do social media or not, right? Or technology or not. If if Kala Ghoda would have made a choice, to not do it virtually, we would have not had this conversation, right? For everyone who has joined it, we are thankful to technology for creating that space for each one of us. The idea is, how do we manage our social media? How do we do it on a day to day basis that helps us? Now, in the last 10 minutes, I'm going to quickly move and touch few things on, like in the next slide, talk about what, anxiety looks like, what contributes, and the solutions around it. Multitasking, we have already discussed. Um, Errand paralysis, right? There are enough times, there was all throughout the, even before the pandemic, there is a shoe that lies in each of our house that needs repair, and we wait for so long to get it repaired that we don't end up using. Errand paralysis is at another time, there's chip nail paint and that you don't remove. Errand paralysis is we not doing things that take small portions of our time. So people would say, I just need to send the CA, my passbook, and I haven't done it. I need to just make the call and order for fruits, and I have not done it. It's simpler to, order, via an app rather than order fruits. Errand paralysis is we not doing the smallest of things because there are no consequences for them right away, right? Bedtime procrastination, where we delay our sleep. How often has it happened? Think about it, where you're lying in, you're going through your social media, and 2 hours have passed, and you were in bed at 12 until 3, 2, you haven't gone off to sleep. The last two, we have spoken about personal beliefs. The last two is perfectionism and imposter syndrome. We sometimes have ideas that we need to do things perfectly. uh, we anxiety also gives us a feeling that if I don't do it perfectly, I am not good enough. Perfectionism leads to procrastination leads to more anxiety. Imposter syndrome is this feeling where we feel we are just faking it. Everything that's going right is just fluke and will be discovered. For people who are in creative professions, often feel it. If you have had success early on, there are a lot of people, men and women, who would feel, I'm just an imposter. People will just discover it. Let's move to the next slide, which is going to talk about what burnout can look, and then quickly the solution. Let's move to the next one. That's fine. This is a quick check for anyone, since, the pandemic is still going on. These are the 4 signs of what burnout looks like. So if you think you have struggled with this, it's a good idea for you to reach out to a mental health professional. Let's move to the next slide. uh, one of the ways that you can manage anxiety is focusing on mindfulness. The entire focus mindfulness is learning to stay in the present, and we can stay in the present if we begin to trust ourselves when it comes to thinking about the future. I want all of you to think about something you did, how you felt in March when the pandemic started, how you feel now. Think of a strength, think of something that you managed to deal with that you possibly didn't think you would, and use it as a moment. Use that strength in the present moment to tell yourself that I have the trust within to be able to deal with what's coming. One way of building mindfulness is mindfully listening to our partners. It's mindfully being present, and what we will talk about later as pause ritual. Let's move to the next slide, where I'm talking about, here are some things that can help you, whether a pandemic or not, to manage anxiety. Work during the pandemic, a lot of people struggled with scarcity narrative, where we felt that maybe we'll not have enough work, maybe I'll not have enough money. What if I fall sick? I will not be able to work. So we overworked ourselves, right? Work at a pace that you can sustain. If you continue to work at a very fast task, at a very fast pace, your body will have a just out of sheer shock. Second, the antidote to multitasking is monotasking. learn to do one thing at a time. If you're listening to me or anyone, just try and be present is a way of engaging in mindfulness. Third, when it comes to your messages, when it comes to when do you pick the call, you can schedule your availability, right? There's this beautiful poem that I've shared, in the past, on my social media about how even when I'm not seeing clients, when it's when I'm just sitting down while I'm free, I'm still not free because I'm trying to pay attention to my breath. I'm trying to calm myself down. And it's important we all do that. It's a poem with an artist abroad who has written, but it's a beautiful reminder that we need to also schedule rest in our life. Develop a better relationship with sleep. Human mind requires easily up to 8 hours of sleep. And in the last few months, it's more and more important that you have at least 7 to 8 hours. If not seven, 6.5 would be on the, that you should be able to have 6.5 hours of sleep. Not one of the authors whose work I really like, he says that not sleeping is a slow form of self euthanasia. So learn to find those periods of rest. We have spoken about digital boundaries, filtering feedback. I think what's most important is for all of us is developing courage to be disliked, right? Our anxiety is often linked to, if I set a boundary, somebody may not like me. I can set a boundary, be gentle about it, and still be firm. And it may be most important to do that for my own well being. If I'm not taking care of my own well being, even if others like me, I will have a burnout. Now, in the next slide, I'm talking about what's at the core of our healing, of managing anxiety. We all are capable of engaging in what I call self soothing. Self soothing is our capacity to calm ourselves down. It's our ability to center ourselves, to engage in behaviors that allow us to calm down, that allow us to recenter ourselves. So think of what is something that provides you self soothing. For me, it's going for long solitary walk, having that cup of tea alone. Where I remember I had asked once my daughter who was struggling. She had come back from school. Somebody had been really rude to her. She perceived as being rude at that time. I tried helping her, but I couldn't. And at that point, I asked her, what can you do that will allow you to feel better? She said, maybe I can paint and I'll feel better. Or if you make noodles. So she did paint, which is self-soothing, and I did make the noodles, and that was self-soothing. Now, when I tell her the same story, she's 11 now, and she tells me that now she says crying is also self-soothing. And I think it's important that we ask ourselves what is self-soothing. Here is an activity. You can create a self-soothing box for yourself. Think of things that calm you down, that you can see that calm you down. What can you taste, what can you hear that calms you down, what can you touch and feel like a blanket, what can you smell like a perfume that calms you down. Make a list of all that and put it in a box and create a self-soothing box for you. When we are feeling anxious, we often don't even know what to do exactly. Let's move now to the next slide, which is my pause rituals, which is my favorite one. I struggled with, and we will end with this. I struggled with burnout about 7 years back, and at that time I realized what helps me calm, and that's how the term pause rituals came into being. I realized if I schedule a pause in my calendar, I can pause. I'm very structured, so if I don't have pause built into the calendar, I'll finish client work but end up reading, end up doing other things. Pause rituals basically means it's the way to also prevent anxiety. It basically means figuring a way in your day to day life where you consciously choose to stop. You engage in self soothing activities, and you also monotask. So, journaling, deep breathing, meditation, your exercise class, all these could be your pause rituals. And just as I come to an end, what I want everyone to do is, think about what are your pause rituals. If you think you're going to make a self-soothing box for yourself, send a picture, to Kala Ghoda. The Instagram handle is mentioned on the slide, and to me, and we will share it. We would love to know what your pause rituals are. I would suggest to begin with, schedule a time when you engage in pause ritual every day, and maybe have a peer buddy who you tell that you are engaging in a pause ritual, and for them to create that space for you. I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening. Yes, I think, that's what our last slide is. So thank you for listening. And yes, if you have any questions, please start typing it out. And, I think Rohini will be around soon and we can get into Q&A.
Sonali, you don't need to tell them that they need to type in questions because questions have been coming through the session. And
Oh, I had no idea.
I'm going to get right into it. Karishma Gupta asked a very, very good question right up top. And she said, how do you explain to people that if you need mental health help, then you're not crazy, you're not mad, which I thought was brilliant because this has been the reason why you've been practicing as well to kind of, avoid this block against mental health. So do you want to start with that, how this barrier needs to be broken?
Absolutely. Thank you, Karishma, for asking that. I think the first thing to tell people is that one of the reasons we reach out for help is to be able to allow ourselves to lead an effective life, to be able to lead a more mindful life. Also, reaching out for help is a huge sign of strength. During the pandemic, only leaders that are thriving, and a lot of organizations are thriving, where leaders are showing courageous behavior in the context of reaching out for help and vulnerability. So, it's important to tell them that you're reaching out to learn what do techniques, tips, and tricks look like to deal with anxiety, to deal with grief. Also, to even tell people that sometimes, I may be struggling with something with a close friend of mine or with a partner of mine, and I don't know who to talk to, right? I have an issue with the partner and with the friend. You need sometimes another voice who can listen to you. And also, I think we live in a world where sometimes people closest to us are also struggling, and we feel guilty when we are burdening them. And in all those times, it may be still necessary to reach out to someone. And it's definitely not crazy. I have a 80-year-old client in therapy who's in therapy because the person lives alone and they feel that they need a safe space to talk. I also have a 25-year-old in therapy to learn about compassion, and just so that he can be more compassionate. So people can lie on a spectrum. Then there are people who is just in therapy because they are wondering if to be a parent or not.
There's a question from Ajay. Thank you so much for answering that, Sonali. But the next question comes in from Ajay, and this is quite interesting. Ajay Kumar Datta, if that's the right name, because there's so many questions, wants to know if when is that stage when you think that you need to go to a therapist? What a fantastic question. And wants to ask if, is it easy to do so, and is it affordable for everybody? Some really great questions there.
Absolutely. So one, I begin with when is a good stage to reach out to a therapist. Um, if you feel that you are struggling with the life area, with the transition, it could even be a positive one like a marriage or a pregnancy. Or if you also feel, and marriage is not always positive. If you feel that maybe it has been hard, there's pressure to one of my earlier Mumbai Mirror columns was about how marriage has become the Aadhaar card, right? Like this teenager, this client of mine who said that marriage has become this new Aadhaar card, which my parents, society, everybody needs, but I don't feel the need. And she was in therapy because she wanted to understand how to manage it, how to deal with everybody's expectation. If you find yourself in challenging situations where your resources are limited, you are dealing with dilemmas, it may be one of the situations when you reach out. Second, if you struggle with panic attacks, there are suicidal thoughts, there are feelings about harming yourself, if there's depression, if you feel your work productivity has come down, if you feel you're struggling in interpersonal relationships, if there's anger, if you feel overwhelmed, if you're not sleeping right, if you feel there's addiction, they are all reasons for you to reach out, right? Second, you could also reach out if you want to improve your quality of life. So there are people who reach out because they want to make their marriage feel better. There are people who reach out because they want to build a better relationship with their mom or dad. Or sometimes there are enough people who reach out because they want to improve a relationship with themselves, because they are very harsh or negative to themselves, right? And all of us have been there. I don't think we are trained to be self-compassionate. Coming to the second bit, it is, you could look at the I call crowdsourced list, which has, so if you go to I call, I and CALL, there's a crowdsourced therapy list of therapists all across the country. You could, access that has the number of therapists. The list is also there on my YouTube channel. There's also a host of helpline numbers that are available, across the country. They are also there on my Instagram page. I can also share it with Kala Ghoda team. Those are the resources to begin with. There are therapists of all kind, people who charge as little as 500 to helplines, which are completely free. So you could begin based on what are you looking at. So yes, it is affordable and accessible. Does it need more work to be more accessible? Yes, it does need more work to be more accessible, but there are enough avenues. Does it answer all three?
Yes, it absolutely did, Sonali. Thank you for that. Let's take you to the next question. Lots of conversation actually about pause rituals. And I know that we spoke about it, guys. Let me make a big confession here. Like, I am somebody who had the good fortune of actually going into therapy, and my therapist has been Sonali. So I have had these like in depth, okay, with Sonali, which is why I said, okay, Sonali, your book, your channel, all of these things are really helping people. And because I've had a personalized experience, I will not say the same experience would be yours, but at the same time, if you want to really deep dive into stuff like this, you might have to actually ask your own therapists, okay, about these things in detail. Having said that, the book that Sonali has written is something that's really helping a lot of people. So you might want to consider picking up a copy of that, because there are lots of stages of being comfortable with therapy, right? Or talking to yourself. So let's try and, break this down and not make it a one size fits all. However, Sonali, I think that we should spend a little bit of time talking about pause rituals, because I think that's really given people hope. So, what are pause rituals? Okay, once again, because some of them said that, I try a pause ritual and I get bored midway, and somebody agreed with them. So, do you want to take a couple of minutes to talk about this?
Absolutely. Thank you, Rohini, for sharing. And I think that means a lot. Pause rituals, are a huge part of the book. So you could read there. But let me begin by telling you that for all of us who multitask, who like our work, who are passionate even about our work, or even, if you are a homemaker or you are somebody who's working, we often fill our life with so many things. So pause ritual is a conscious way of building a break, right? Just, think about, you will finish this session, and maybe the first thing that a lot of you would do, including me, would be to look at the phone, right? And to look at what has happened, in that 40 minutes, 50 minutes we were here. So pause ritual is a conscious way to build in a break for yourself.
Sorry, Sonali, I think we got you again. So, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Okay, yes. So, pause ritual could be anywhere from 2 minutes to about 20 minutes to about 40 minutes. It's a conscious way of just resting, monotasking, where you do one thing at a time, where you're almost allowing your brain to slow down, to listen to your body, to listen to the bodily cues. Where are you feeling the anxiety? So, whether it's journaling or, like, let's say going for a walk. Now I've learned to just go for a walk and not listen to a podcast. It has taken years of effort, but it's my way of paying attention to the nature. And if you follow me on Instagram, you do know that I post pictures, that I take on my walk. I do that at the end of it because it's a conscious way of just enjoying the nature and not doing anything. So pause, you know, even if you get bored with it, the idea is to keep doing it. The human brain, whatever you keep doing over and over, the brain establishes new neural pathways. But right away, you won't be able to do it. I had the burnout 7 years back. The book was written in 2019. So it has taken a long way for the pause rituals to become every day and for me to consciously do it. And I still, on some days, forget to do it or tell myself, no, I'm doing fine. And then next day I start feeling a little overwhelmed and I go back to it. So be kind to yourself. Also experiment with pause rituals. It could be having tea, it could be, it could be just doodling, it could be just sitting in one place and watching outside the window. Experiment, create a host of pause.
Well, absolutely, Sonali. I have
We
learned a
move
lot
to the
from
one,
your session.
Rohini.
Yes, I said that we're almost out of time,
I'm
and
around,
the
yes.
questions. Yes, the questions will never stop, but I do hope that this session has answered at the most basic of it. Two things. One is to identify anxiety, and number two is to, most importantly, be kind to yourself if you're going through a tough time, because everybody is going through a tough time. And I just think that, all these things about being strong sometimes really come in the way of us actually turning out and being nice and kind to our own selves first. Having said that, I'd like you to just pay attention to a couple of things. If you're in the chat box right now, there is a link to Sonali Gupta's YouTube channel that I have put in for you. There's also a link to our YouTube channel, Kala Ghoda, where you can watch this later for the ones who might have missed out on this session right now. There's also Sonali Gupta's email address where you could find her. So there's lots of ways in which you can still keep in touch, with a mental health expert, and also the iCall numbers that, she talked about. So even that's there. So just make sure that you go on and you log on and you search for it. For right now, Sonali, I am very, very grateful that you've given us at the Kala Ghoda festival this year your time, albeit virtually. I know it takes a lot for you to put together such a fantastic 1 hour concise presentation, if I may say, of such a huge topic. So I just want to appreciate it. And I would love it if my wonderful, wonderful audience can also drop a message of thanks. And, she always talks about practicing gratitude. So can we do that right now? Can we please practice that gratitude and tell Sonali it was absolutely wonderful? So Sonali, thank you so much again for joining us at the Kala Ghoda Arts Festival.
Thank you so much for for giving mental health a good name. And yes, for everyone who was there, I would love to listen and hear about your pause ritual and self-soothing box. So yes, if you make it, you choose to do it, then please tag us. Tag Rohini, tag Kala Ghoda Festival, and tag me so that we can keep the conversation going. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. And that was Sonali Gupta with us at the Kala Ghoda Arts Festival. Up next, we've just got 1 minute to go. It is Purvayan Chatterjee, and he has a sitar workshop lined up. I'm just going to keep it on, even though I don't play the sitar, to hear the beautiful tunes. And while I actually stare out of my window. So thank you so much, and do log on to kgaf2021.com for more. This is me, Rohini, signing out.